Have you ever imagined dying, meeting Jesus, and coming back with a word that could change the destiny of the entire world? In today's video, you'll learn the true story of Cole Harrington, an American soldier who had a near-death experience and received a shocking revelation from Jesus in The Last Command, the message that is about to awaken thousands of souls. If this topic impacts you, like it, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and comment below which city you're watching from. Let's spread this truth together. My name is Cole Harrington. I'm 38 years old. I was born and raised in Amarillo, Texas, in a family that valued discipline, silence, and faith, but never doubt. I learned from an early age that a real man doesn't cry, doesn't hesitate, and, above all, doesn't weaken. So I joined the United States Army at age 18, searching for a cause, a direction, and maybe a reason to justify why the world seemed so cold. I spent nearly 20 years as an elite infantryman, serving in volatile regions of the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. I saw things no one should have to see. I did things I'd rather not repeat. And with each deployment, my faith in people and in God grew thinner. I became the kind of man who believes only in what he can hold in his own hands or measure with military precision. He was stationed at a testing base in the Nevada desert when it all happened. It was an ordinary day, if there is such a thing, as an ordinary day in the Army. The sun was merciless, the air was dry, and the dust stuck to our skin as if it wanted to devour us from the inside out. I had woken up early as usual and was leading a training session with combat drones in an open field. At 1:47 p.m., something inside me just switched off. It started with a sharp pain in my chest. I thought it was just dehydration or a pulled muscle, but within seconds my heart felt like it was beating out of my chest. The sound of drones and engines turned to a distant hum, and my vision began to blur as if the world was melting before my eyes. Cole? Cole, are you okay? I heard Sergeant Mitchell's voice, muffled, distant, as if coming from underwater. I tried to answer, but my mouth wouldn't obey. I felt my legs give out and the blue sky exploded in a flash of white as I hit my head on the dry, hard desert ground. It was then that everything disappeared. Time no longer made sense. The pain disappeared. The warmth turned into a cold, silent nothingness. I was no longer lying in the sand. I was nowhere. There was only a soft, cozy darkness, as if I was in the belly of something much larger than I could understand. And then came the sound, a voice, a word, like a whisper that didn't enter through the ears but through the soul. Listen. That's all. A single word, but charged with a power that made my entire being tremble. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was. But in that instant I realized that I was dead. That word, listen, it wasn't sound. It was essence. It was as if it had been planted directly inside me, and from there it spread like invisible roots, shattering everything I thought I knew about life. In a blink of consciousness, I was no longer in the dark. I was standing, or floating maybe, in the center of a luminous void. There was no ground, no sky, no horizon, just a white light, so pure and intense that it seemed to have a life of its own. But strangely, it didn't hurt. It didn't blind me. It was like being surrounded by something infinitely intelligent and loving. That's when I realized I no longer had a body. But at the same time, Ira, still thinking, feeling, remembering, and most of all, I listened. In the beginning, there were voices, hundreds, thousands, as if millions of people were speaking at once but without getting confused. It was as if I could understand each one of them. Children laughing, women singing, men crying, prayers in languages I had never heard before, broken hearts crying out for help, silent screams of lost souls. And then, absolute silence, followed by a sound, not a thunderclap, not an explosion, but the sound of a name A name that was not spoken was revealed. Jesus. At that moment I felt my spirit tremble, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Even though I had distanced myself from everything religious, I knew that presence that was approaching now, that indescribable force that filled the space where there was no space, it was him. And I, a hardened and unbelieving soldier who had seen death up close countless times, fell to my knees without knowing how. There was no military pride there. There was no logic. There was only truth. And he spoke. But not like you speak with words. His sentences went straight to the soul, as if they were memories that had always been there, waiting to be awakened. You lived as if war was your mission, but I gave you another. I wanted to answer, to ask, to justify myself. But I couldn't. My mind was flooded with a presence that was fire and tenderness at the same time. A love so intense, so absolute, that it was impossible to bear without crying. The world has been lost in noise. I have come to bring the only word that sets you free. And then, before me, appeared something that seemed to float in space, a book of light. But it had no cover, no pages. It was made of energy, pure vibration, and inside it, just one sentence. Love is the last order. I trembled, because I knew this was the deepest truth a human being could bear. That was the word of Jesus. I stood there paralyzed before that book made of living light, feeling every cell of my consciousness burn with the weight of those words. Love is the last order. To my war-trained mind, this phrase was an oxymoron. I had spent years obeying commands: advance, fire, neutralize. But never in my entire career had anyone given me this order: aim. And yet, in that moment, I understood that every other order I had ever followed, even the ones that had led to my death, was incomplete without this one. As if love were the only real mission, and everything else had been noise, distraction, shadow. The book of light pulsed before me, and then it opened. Not with physical pages, but with memories. My memories. Like a movie projected into my own soul, I saw my entire life unfold before me. A lonely childhood, when my father, a strict pastor, taught me that fear was respect, and that God only listened to those who obeyed without question. The first trauma was in my adolescence, when my older brother died in an accident, and no one could explain why. They just said it was God's will, but that only distanced me from him. I saw my young, furious eyes deciding that the war in the world was more understandable than the war within the soul. I saw my early days in the army, when the noise of guns seemed more comforting to me than the silence of prayers that were never answered. And then the faces. Men I killed, friends I lost, victims I saw and couldn't, or didn't want to, save. The scenes hit me like daggers of light, not to punish me, but Toto, wake up. It was as if Jesus was saying to me, I didn't come to condemn you, Cole. I came to show you who you always were before you forgot. The scenes changed. I saw small moments, almost forgotten. The smile I gave an Iraqi boy when I gave him my rations, the tear I held back as I buried my best friend, the hug I gave the nurse who held my hand after an ambush. Simple things. But there, in the light, these small actions were giants. And then a new voice echoed inside me. It was the same one, but now firmer, more direct. Every act of love resonates eternally in the universe. No gesture is insignificant. I started crying, because I understood that what I thought was weakness, loving, feeling, forgiving, was in fact the only kind of strength that goes through death. Jesus approached me once more, not with anger, not with authority, but with eyes so full of understanding that they seemed to give me back pieces of my soul that I didn't even know I had lost. The world needs soldiers of the last order, and that order is love. At that moment I knew the most difficult mission was just beginning. In that space outside of time, where the soul breathes more than the body ever could, I was overcome by a dense silence, not the kind that scares, but the kind that prepares. Jesus was looking at me, and his presence was like a gravitational field, impossible to resist, impossible to escape. And then he spoke, with the serenity of one who knows all destinies. You think the war is over, but the real war is just beginning. These words echoed within me like a battle drum beating against the walls of the spirit. War? I thought. What war could there be here? But before I could finish thinking, everything around me changed. The soft light was replaced by a chaotic scene. Not hellish, but familiar, like a distorted reflection of the earth. I saw cities I recognized, but shrouded in a kind of dark veil. People walking the streets with empty eyes, connected to devices but disconnected from each other. I saw young people being dragged down by invisible currents, fear, addiction, hatred, isolation. I saw fathers and mothers screaming without a voice, trying to save children who could no longer hear. I saw religions turned into a stage, faith sold as entertainment, and the name of Jesus used as a weapon, not a cure. I saw soldiers like me, not with weapons but with hardened hearts ready to destroy anything that challenged their certainties. And then Jesus said, "This is the silent war, the war for consciousness." The scene widened, and in the background I saw shadowy entities. Not grotesque demons, but cold, intelligent, subtle silhouettes. They whispered doubts, cultivated resentment, fueled divisions. It was as if they walked among us, invisible, but profoundly influential. They don't want the human being to wake up, Jesus explained. They fear a humanity that discovers its true power, to love above fear. His words fell upon me like holy lightning. I trembled, not with fear, but with clarity. I was seeing what the world had forgotten to see. The real battle was not between nations, religions, or ideologies. It was between love and oblivion. So what do? I asked, my voice breaking, still kneeling in that heartbreaking vision of the world. Jesus knelt before me. Yes, he, the Son of the Most High, he knelt before me. His eyes were on mine, and with the sweetest, most powerful voice I've ever heard, he said, "Hear my word, live my word, be my word." And it was then that everything became bright again. His light no longer blinded me. It revealed me. It restored me. I was no longer a soldier in Earth's war. I was a soldier of love that comes from heaven, and my weapon was the living truth of what he had shown me. As the light once again enveloped everything around me, as if the universe itself was breathing silently, I realized that something inside me had been completely reconfigured. The anger I had carried since I was a child, the weight of decisions on the battlefield, the fear of death disguised as courage, everything had been undone in seconds by the gaze of Jesus and the power of a simple sentence. Let my word be. But what did that mean? Before doubt could set in, the reality around me had transformed again. I was now in a place impossible to describe with earthly words. It was like being inside a gigantic heart, pulsating with light, sound, and truth. Each beat created waves of love that spread like living energy. It was the heart of the word. There I understood what Jesus really meant. I saw multitudes of people from all cultures, languages, and times, walking together towards the same source of light. I saw atheists who loved more deeply than many religious people. I saw children from the slums smiling with purity, while men in ties cried for never having known true love. I saw priests, monks, rabbis, shamans, all drinking from the same source. The love that does not judge, the love that does not demand, the love that and. Jesus appeared beside me again, but this time he didn't say anything. He just showed me. He showed me how every gesture of love, every hug, every act of forgiveness, every word of encouragement was transformed into golden particles that left people's chests and rose, joining the vibration of the heart of the word. Everything that is done with sincere love is not lost, he said finally. Become a part of me. It was at that moment that I understood something that tore my soul in two. Jesus is not just a name. Jesus is the very vibration of conscious love. He did not come to found a religion. He came to rekindle a memory. The reminder that we come from the light, and that the only way to return home is to walk through the darkness with love. My spirit cried with regret and wonder at the same time. How could I have lived so many years thinking that being strong meant not feeling? How could I have ignored the fact that the only real strength is the one that gives itself completely, even if it hurts? I saw in myself all the times I held back, tears, all the times I preferred to keep quiet about the truth out of pride, all the times I used pain as armor. And then I also saw Jesus forgiving me, not with words, but with a simple gesture. He reached out his hand and placed it on my chest, and everything, absolutely everything, inside me lit up. It was as if the man himself, living word, had touched me, as if God's word were not something to be read, but lived, felt, embodied. Do you want to know what it means to be strong, Cole? He asked. I just nodded, voiceless. Being strong is continuing to love even when the whole world says it's not worth it. After Jesus touched my chest, something tore inside me, or maybe outside. The space around us parted as if someone had pulled back a veil, and what I saw behind it took my breath away. It was no longer the physical world I knew. It was what's behind it. It was as if I were looking at planet Earth through my soul. I saw the city streets bustling with activity, but now each person had a kind of aura, like an energy field that revealed the state of their heart. Some were golden, others blue, but many were gray, red, opaque, and I felt what each one was carrying. I saw a mother sitting in her car, crying silently after dropping her son off at school. I saw a teenager wishing for death, in a dark room while posting fake smiles on social media. I saw a lonely businessman in an expensive suit trying to buy happiness with digits. I saw an elderly woman praying with faith while barely having food on the table. And then Jesus said, "You are seeing the world as heaven sees it." That took me apart. I always wondered silently why God allowed so much pain. Why did the good suffer? Why war, poverty, betrayal? Why so much divine silence in the face of so much human crying? But now, seeing the world like this, I understand. God was never silent. We were the ones who were deaf. Because between the chaos of the world and the light of heaven, there is the Word. And this Word, the one that Jesus embodies, is not just sound. It is choice. It is action. It is vibration. And it is always trying to reach each one of us, even in the darkest moments. But why does the world seem so lost? I asked Jesus, looking at that vast expanse of souls stumbling over each other. He responded with sadness, but also with hope. Because many have forgotten that love is a daily choice, not a passing feeling. They have exchanged the eternal for the immediate, silence for noise, and truth for distraction. In that moment, I realized that there were invisible threads connecting us all. Every loving thought created light. Every judgment, darkness. Every choice made with compassion strengthened the invisible fabric that held it all together. Evil prospers when love is silent, said Jesus, with a look so intense that I felt my spirit kneel again. I, who always believed that changing the world was a mission for giants, now saw that change was born in every small act. A good morning said with soul. A difficult forgiveness but offered. A silence where there would be hatred. A simple prayer. A sincere hug. All of this was strength. All this was living word. And then he showed me something that cut me open. My own heart. I saw him, throbbing, bruised, but still full of possibilities. And in the sweetest, most terrible voice I have ever heard, Jesus said, "You can come back, Cole, but not like before." The voice of Jesus echoed within me like an irreversible call. "You can come back, Cole, but not like before." Those words didn't sound like an option. They were a cosmic oath, a line drawn between who I was and who I needed to be. I was still immersed in that spiritual reality, in that field where everything was seen with absolute clarity. No masks, no excuses. The ego could not hide there. No uniform would protect me from what was to come. Jesus took me to a breaking point, literally. Before us was something that looked like a portal, but not like the ones in the movies. It was like a fold in the light, where time and space bent around a choice. On one side, I saw eternal peace. The home we all seek without knowing it, where there is no pain, no fear, no loneliness. On the other side, the earth, but not as we know it. It was as if I was seeing the planet from God's point of view, and what I saw made me fall apart. I saw wars that are yet to happen, disasters created by humanity itself, a thirst for control disguised as progress, children growing up without knowing what true affection is, a world increasingly connected by devices and increasingly disconnected from the soul. But then I saw something else. I also saw little lights turning on in unlikely places, in prisons, in schools, in squares, in hospitals, people who had heard the word, simple people, without titles, without pulpits, but who carried something in their eyes, something that lit up in the midst of chaos like torches on a battlefield. They were mothers, street cleaners, taxi drivers, nurses, young people, ordinary people with power, divine pulsing inside them. And Jesus said, "They listened, but many still haven't." It was at that moment that I understood the real reason why he was showing me all of that. He didn't want to impress me. He wanted to summon me. Yes, Jesus was calling me back to earth, not as the usual soldier, but as a messenger of the last word. Not to preach religion, but to be living reminder that heaven is not far away. It is in the next gesture of love. I was shaking. Not because I was afraid of the mission, but because I felt that somehow I had already accepted it, even before I was born. But how am I going to remember all that down there? I asked, feeling the weight of human oblivion already approaching, like a mist trying to put out the fire I had just lit. Jesus looked at me deeply and with infinite tenderness answered, "You will not remember with your mind, you will remember with your heart, because that word was imprinted on your soul." And then with a gesture I will never forget, he placed his hand on my chest once more. This time I felt something like fire entering me, but it didn't burn. Woke up. Wherever you go, take this. Love is the last order. Tell them, show them, even if they laugh, even if they doubt. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I answered without hesitation, without fear, without uniform. "Yes, sir." When I said, "Yes, Lord," I felt as if the stars around me heard me. Everything vibrated, everything expanded. The light around began to spin, not like a whirlwind, but like a vortex of creation, spinning, with the strength of a decision made with the heart. Jesus smiled. But it wasn't just a smile of approval. It was a smile parting. My spirit, which had been as light as a breath until then, began to be pulled. It was as if an invisible current was dragging me back through a tunnel of pure energy. Only this time there was no heavenly music. There was urgency. The mission had been given, and now I would return with it engraved in my being. The journey back was different from the journey there. On the way there, I was carried by the soft light of revelation. Now I was returning loaded with a truth that no longer fit inside me. I felt my spiritual body vibrating so intensely that it seemed like I would explode before I even reached Earth. But I kept going. There was no turning back. In a last moment of lucidity outside of matter, I looked back and saw Jesus once more. He said nothing now. He simply extended his hand, and from it came a single golden spark, like a living spark that flew toward me and entered directly into my chest. At that moment, a cosmic pain hit me. It was time for re-entry. My body, abandoned minutes before in a hospital bed in Nevada, was now waiting for me like an old garment that needed to be put on again. But something didn't fit. It was like trying to put the ocean in a glass. I felt my heart start beating violently again. My lungs exploded with air. I heard alarms, screams, running footsteps. He's coming back. Pressure rising. My God, the impossible has happened. But I wasn't just listening with my ears. I was hearing with the Spirit, passing through the sounds like someone waking up from a dream where everything was true, and now has to pretend it's just a dream. My mind screamed, "Don't forget, don't forget, don't forget." And then something unbelievable happened. The very second I opened my eyes, still intubated, confused, weak, I heard a whisper. It wasn't from the medical team, it wasn't mental. Era, the same voice that called me before. "You remember, Cole?" And I remembered, not with pictures, not with words, but with presence. In my chest, where he had touched, something still burned softly. A sensation that no drug, no scientific explanation, no human experience could ever replicate. It was the word. The last order. And in that freezing cold hospital, among machines, tubes, and incredulous looks, a certainty rose within me with a force greater than any armed troop. I had died. I had been with Jesus. And now I carried what he wanted the world to know. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same again. In the days after my return, the world around me seemed the same. Same streets, same news, same empty routines. But something screamed differently inside me. It was as if reality had lost its skin. I saw through the empty words. I felt the weight hidden in the eyes. I heard the tears behind the smiles. Because now I carried a secret. A secret that no one on the big screens, in the newspapers, or in the crowded churches wants you to hear. A secret that is not new but has been buried under centuries of guilt, fear, and control. The word of Jesus is not a doctrine, it is an activation, and he whispered it to me, to be said to you. Love is the last order. These words, so simple, carry more dynamite than any military weapon. They dissolve ego. They disarm hatred. They heal wounds that medicine cannot reach. And that's why so many people fear this truth. Why, if love is really the last order, then everything changes. Policies lose their meaning. Dogmas crumble. Hierarchies are inverted. And the simplest of men, he who loves in silence, becomes a direct channel of heaven. During my recovery, doctors would come and examine me as if I were a miracle, and I was. But not because of my vital signs, it was because of the flame in my eyes. I tried to explain, but words failed me. Because how do you explain that death brought you back to life more alive than ever? How do you look at a world that still idolizes guns, walls, and titles, and say that's the only real strength to kneel before your neighbor with an open heart? People laughed. Some were scared. Others called me a lunatic, a delusional person. They said it was a lack of oxygen, a hallucination, a common neurochemical event in trauma. But what they don't know, or they don't want to accept, is that a hallucination does not heal your soul. A hallucination do not rewrite your heart. A hallucination does not set fire to your bones for a truth that burns without consuming. What I experienced was real. More real than the chair you're sitting in right now. More real than your fear, your doubt, your anger. More real than life itself. And this reality, which has a name, a face, and eyes that see straight to its essence, gave me a mission. Jesus looked me in the eyes, and with the firmness of a supreme commander said, They need to hear. They have forgotten. But within them, the word still sleeps. And now I'm here, not to be worshipped, not to be followed, but to remind you. You've heard this voice too, maybe in a dream, in a silence, in a tear, in a moment when everything seemed to stop. She is calling you. The last order still echoes. When I returned to my body, still connected by wires, tubes, and machines, I immediately realized that something in me had been left behind, and something infinitely greater had come with me. I was no longer the same man who fell to the ground in the Nevada desert. There was no more room inside me for arrogance, for indifference, for this armor that I had carried for almost 40 years. The breath that now filled my lungs was more than air. It was purpose. During those silent days in the hospital, with my soul still in transition, every beat of my heart seemed to echo the phrase I heard from Christ himself. Love is the last order. It was like a sacred code pulsing along with my blood. And the more I opened myself to him, the more I felt the world would never be the same again. Because after you hear the living word of Jesus, you can never unhear it again. I didn't hear voices. I didn't see angels on the ceiling, but there was something different about the morning light, the touch of the hands that cared for me, the silence between visits. Everything had weight. Everything had a soul. People spoke to me normally, doctors, nurses, family members, but behind every word I could feel the state of their spirit, as if their souls were laid bare before the new insight I had received. I understood that Jesus' mission, the one he showed me in the dimension of truth, is still ongoing, and that he is calling soldiers not to destroy, but to wake up. I realized that no matter how far you have strayed from faith, Jesus is not a religious name. He is the frequency of all that is real. In his presence, I understood that you can live your entire life without stepping foot in a church and still encounter him in your most intimate moment of repentance or surrender, because he does not require behavior. It calls for transformation, and this transformation had already begun in me. I began to realize that my entire life, every trauma, every mission, every loss, had been a rehearsal for the true calling. Take this word to those who still don't. Remember having heard it, not with preaching, but with presence, because now I know. The world will not be saved by dogmas, not even by shouts of hatred in the name of God. He will be saved by awakened souls who dare to love even when everything around them asks otherwise. And me? I'm just a man who died and heard from the mouth of Jesus himself the final order. Come back, love, and remind them of what they have forgotten. Now, everything I do, everything I say, everything I own, carries this sacred mission. I don't know how much time I have left in this world, but I know that until my last breath I will obey last order, because after dying, I finally learned what it means to live. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.